that erodes patient trust because you Google something, whether you're looking for directions or you're ready to book an appointment or send a referral or whatever, and you can't do that. So it'll ruin your day, first of all, because all of a sudden you're going to get a phone call that says, "Hey, I tried to go to your website, it's not working." So that's going to blow up the rest of your day, most likely.
You think?
But then on top of that, it just erodes trust from the patient standpoint because that your website's supposed to be your first impression. It's supposed to be safe and secure. You can't keep your website safe. How are you going to keep me safe? It builds on all of these conscious and subconscious kind of things.
Hey there, welcome to the Dr. Marketing Tips Show. I am Jennifer.
And I'm Corey.
And today we're going to talk about something nobody wants to hear about, and that is malware in your marketing. In fact, yesterday, Corey, we had a malware attack with a client, and it led us to say, we need to talk about this on the show.
Yeah. So, it's something that you never really want to talk about. You think you're covered until you're not. And so that's something that we were dealing with yesterday. So we thought it made sense to share some stats about, how often these things occur, and then talk through a very real, very recent experience that we had and kind of share what happened, what that means, and what we did to fix it, and what you should kind of be on the lookout for. So what we saw really was uh, there was an instance with one of our client sites where a patient would click on the Google listing. So they would Google for this particular practice, click on either the main listing or their Google business listing, and this sketchy kind of pharmaceutical website would come up instead of the actual practice website. But if you actually just typed in the URL, it would work fine. So the first thing that we did was say, "Oh no," and throw up some red flags, some flares, whatever you want to call it, and then dig into what happened. But what we found was that again, that the site looked fine if you were going directly, and it was only these Google links that was creating the problem, and that was sort of our first head scratching moment.
But I scratched my head because that was not the case, Corey, for me, because I could click on the Google business listing, but also when I typed in the practice's name and it showed up in search, that link.
Right, the organic link. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the organic link was also it was going, just so that our listeners kind of understand this. It was a neurology group, like a neuro group, and it was sending to a pharmacy / Viagra sales site, and it was like a coming to Jesus, all hands on deck. What is happening? It was a lot.
Yeah, and I was doing a little research before we jumped on for the recording here, and on average, a WordPress site, which is what this site was built in, is attacked every 22 minutes. And malware attacks, like what we experienced, are some of the most common. So, so if you search organically and then clicked on anything from Google, basically anything that popped up, you were redirected. But if you put the address in directly, you were okay. And so what we did was we said, okay, well, if it's coming from Google, let's start with the Google Search Console. So that led us down a rabbit hole, which ultimately it showed everything was fine. Then we said, okay, well, maybe it's the Google business listing. So that led us down a different rabbit hole. This is all happening over the course of, 15, 20 minutes or so, doing the initial scans and whatnot. We found everything looked fine there too. So what we did was we checked the DNS too, just to make sure nothing funky was going on with the actual URL or website address. Totally fine. Restored a backup of the website, still doing it. None of this stuff was really working. And so we did a malware scan, and eventually what it came back as was this fastest cache plugin showed up on the site. And it injected some type of spammy type code that would trigger this redirect for users only coming from Google. And so we were able to, once we found it, we were able to remove that plugin, delete the injected code, rerun the scans, make sure everything was okay, test it across all different devices, and then took a couple of additional measures just for added security, updated the rest of the plugins, added two-factor authentication, changed the password, all this other fun stuff. And what we found was that really there's two ways that sites become infected with malware. That's usually through either insecure passwords, which ours were secure, or outdated plugins. And I think that's the thing where we should spend a couple minutes just kind of talking to the people that are listening to this. So if you have a website and if you are not actively paying attention to it, your website probably has some sort of enhanced functionality through the use of plugins, especially if it's a WordPress site, which a ton of websites are. So if your website's built in WordPress and your plugins and your themes are not up to date, you're leaving yourself vulnerable for these types of attacks. And if you don't get regular backups of your website, so for example, with our clients, we back up our website every day. So if something like this happens, we can, ideally just go back a couple of days if we need to, and then everything's fine. But if you don't have that, it can be a whole issue. So, um, and what the stats say is that outdated plugins actually are responsible for 92% of WordPress vulnerability reports, which is
Yeah,
where this comes from.
and it's not like when you have a plugin that's outdated. It's not like you get a notification.
Yep.
And it's not like the site went down, because our clients, like we have a like a running channel in Slack for internal communications. And so we are notified anytime a site goes down and then it comes back up. And usually it's like a glitch and it happens for like 15 seconds or whatever. But there was no reason that this would happen, or that we would be notified. And so we found it because I was prepping with one of our client people for a meeting with this client, and I was going to grab some data to research something off their site and found it. And so, it's super frightening. It even had to come up in the meeting, and we just disclosed. We said, "Hey, this happened. We're letting you know, but this is why you have us," and we fixed the problem. And they were really happy. But the practice manager didn't want to be caught flat-foot either. If one of the doctors saw it or somebody brought it up that the site was like redirected somewhere, he wanted to know at least that we were on top of it. But yeah, you don't even get notified on these things. It just happens.
Yeah, unless you're, like consistently logging into the website and then checking to see if everything is up to date, which, no one really does. Okay, so what can you do to protect your site? A couple of things. Obviously, keep your plugins and your themes updated. I think that's the number one most important thing, because like we shared, these outdated tools are most often how hackers kind of get in and can redirect your site or bring the whole thing down. So another thing, just to make it a little bit easier, is sometimes through the web development process, and especially if you've got a site that's a couple years old, maybe you've transferred who is hosting your website or who's working on it, you're working with a different company, whatever, um, you'll find that there's inactive plugins. So these plugins are, maybe a web developer of yesterday had 12 plugins, and now you've changed partners. You only use 9 of those. So the other ones are just kind of sitting there, but they're still on the website. They're inactive, but that also means they're out of date. So it's kind of like a side door, if you will. Just because they're not active, the code is still there. So if you're not using any of these plugins, delete them, just get them off there. It saves space. Then you don't have to worry about it. Obviously, use strong admin passwords. Make sure that you change that regularly. I would also suggest, this is something that we do with all of our clients now too, is we hide our login page. So again, just speaking for WordPress, by default, when you go to log into the website, you have /wp-admin. That's sort of what WordPress just assigns. But there are plugins you can use that will actually change that login. So you could have /login or /admin or something like that. But when people are kind of writing these attacks, because it's not like one person usually is going to find your website and say, "Oh, I'm going to get them." It's usually sort of like a mass attack, and so they'll go after this /wp-admin because they know that's where most people are. So I would say change that login URL. You can do that again if you have a WordPress site. There's actually a really good plugin called WPS Hide Login, and it allows you to just change that URL. So you can have slash admin or slash whatever you want it to be. That will help. And then also turn on two-factor authentication. I think that's an important one that a lot of people just don't do because it's kind of annoying. It's a simple step,
I know,
but well, it is annoying. Yes,
very
it's
annoying.
it's a simple enough step. It blocks a lot of these brute force attacks where people are just trying to like get through the website and cause you a headache essentially. But then, it's one of those things where you'll have to have a phone handy or you'll get emailed a code and then you'll have to put in the code. So it is an extra step, but ultimately it's all in the name of security. And then, you should have regular malware scans that are done. And then full disclosure on this site that we're talking about, we do regular plugin updates. They're monthly. And we also do regular malware scans, but again, they're monthly. And so what happened was in the time lapse between the last one and this one, something was out of date, happened to get targeted for the brute force attack while it was out of date, and that's why it happened. So think of if you've got this, and again, you're just managing it yourself, maybe create a calendar invite or set up something to always sort of remind you to do this. So it's not just oh yeah, if you remember one Tuesday to update this thing. And then obviously you've also got Google Search Console that you can use where you can get alerted if something does happen eventually. Google Search Console, one, you have to pay attention to those alerts, and two, it may not find everything though. So just kind of be aware of that.
Yeah, and it really, this is one of those things, like we're giving an example of a single instance that took, I don't know, 4 people on our team to stop what they're doing to go deal with this. And it was just a minor malware hack. It was just a minor infraction. I mean, I've seen practices be taken over by, this was a couple of years ago where their practice, the websites would be taken over and they would hold it for ransom until you pay the cash sum. We have one which is a probably a case study for another day. We can do it in the future where we have thousands upon thousands of spam notifications coming into a site, and we found out it was another vendor, and dealing with the form vendor or somebody else and having to get all the people together, and like, so that is another form of malware attacks that are happening, and we're seeing it constantly. Like there's been an uptick in spam on, and I was trying to figure out what it was. And, I was talking to our web dev team and they said, look, sometimes what happens is all these sites are sitting on a single server and that server gets attacked. And then we only see like an uptick for certain clients because they're all sitting on a single server. And then one day, the malware, like the hackers move on to another server and then we're dealing with another set of clients. Like there's just so many things. Ultimately, though, for our practices out there, like how does this impact the bottom line?
Well, I think, the number one thing is that anyone that was trying to visit the site for the, let's call it hour or two that we were like working through this and that it was a problem, that erodes patient trust because you Google something, whether you're looking for directions or you're ready to book an appointment or send a referral or whatever, and you can't do that. So it'll ruin your day, first of all, because all of a sudden you're going to get a phone call that says, hey, I tried to go to your website, it's not working. So that's going to blow up the rest of your day, most likely.
You
Um,
think?
but, but then on top of that, it just erodes trust from the patient standpoint because, that your website's supposed to be your first impression. It's supposed to be safe and secure. You can't keep your website safe. How are you going to keep me safe? It builds on all of these conscious and subconscious kind of things. And then from a pure dollars and cents standpoint, just lost traffic is lost appointments. If we through a business day, 8 to 5, we book, I don't know what this website does. Let's say it's 100 appointments a day. If it's down for multiple hours, you can do the math. However many hours is down is
Yeah.
however many potential missed appointments that we've got. And then long term, it can lead to SEO penalties from Google because if it's down long enough, what'll happen is Google regularly will try to reindex sites and just make sure that there's recrawl them and see if there's new content there. Well, if it goes to recrawl your site and it's redirecting to this malicious random other website, you'll get all sorts of flags and penalties, and you have to like appeal and go back. It's this whole process. So this recovery time can be really consuming from a time and dollar standpoint. but also it's it can hurt long term because Google will always have this sort of flag on the site now, even if it's fixed. So, obviously that record still exists within Google, so it's a little bit harder to, but potentially to rank long term for things like that. Um, and the reason that you have to pay attention to yourself is because a lot of times too, patients, you might get that phone call that I was kind of half joking about a minute ago. But a lot of patients aren't going to call you to tell you that. They're just going to go click somewhere else and go about their day. And you may never be the wiser. If you're lucky, you're going to get that phone call that alerts you and blows up your day.
That's right. I think that like the biggest takeaway here is that your website's your first impression.
Sure.
You need to keep it safe and secure, just like you would your front office, your building or something like that. Even something as small as a plugin can do major damage when it comes to patient experience, referrals, and just scheduling appointments.
Yeah, 100%. I think, if there's one sort of takeaway from this episode, it would be go right now and audit your website. Talk to your web team. If you don't have a web team, go get one. At least, do something where you can hire somebody quick just to say, hey, do like an audit on this thing. And if you feel comfortable, update those plugins, change those passwords, change how you log into the website, because those are the things that are going to make the biggest difference right away.
Yeah. Are you going to link a security checklist or something like that in the show notes here for everybody?
Yeah, we'll have a resource link where we'll have a checklist of things to do and things to pay attention to if you need one. Yep.
I would leave everyone with this. If you're going to update your website yourself and you're going to update plugins, things like that, make sure you have a backup readily available, because 8 out of 10 times when you're just hitting a button on the back end to update a plugin, it breaks something else. And so just be aware of that and be ready that that's what's going to happen if you are not a developer or a web guy doing this on your own.
That is a great point. Yeah.
Great information, Corey. Hopefully everyone finds this helpful and it gives you something to think about, as if you have enough stuff that you're thinking about on the regular. With that, I'm Jennifer.
I'm Corey.
We'll see you next time on the Dr. Marketing Tips Show. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, guys.
If you want more like this, hit like and subscribe so you'll always be alerted to new episodes when they come out. And if you want information about us, visit us over at insightmg.com. That's insightmg.com. We'll see you on the next episode.